Welcome to the Fusion Cell Podcast, The Military Effect. I'm your host, Jack Heath. Fusion Cell, the founding mission was and still is to this day, the mission bridging the gap between military talent and the civilian workplace. Brian Lewis, Air Force veteran, senior career agent, one of the senior folks at Fusion Cell, delighted Brian is joining us as we bridge the gap between military talent and the civilian workplace. Thanks for being with us, Brian. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Well, Brian, let's talk about your own military journey to becoming a cellmate and a member of Fusion Cell.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for, again, having me in that question. So my military journey. So I stayed in the military for 27 years, 10 months. I have a background in aviation. I also have a background in recruiting, and then also a background in command and control. I always tell people, if you want to know what command and control is, you've ever seen in the movies where they snap the cards and stuff to get the authentication codes for nuclear strikes. That's glamorous, but that's kind of like what I used to do when I felt it was important. That's very glamorous, but not quite the same. I finished out in command, finished out as command chief at one of our bases in the Air Force. And as I finished, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life was the first thing on the agenda, you know. I say that because it was a difficult kind of transition because the military had told me exactly what I was going to be doing for each time I moved. But when it was time for me to make that decision as to what I wanted to do, I had no idea. I had zero idea exactly what I wanted to do. So I figured I needed to get online. So I got on LinkedIn. And as I got on LinkedIn, started trying to connect and network with folks and just really kind of cast the net as to, hey, what's out there? I came upon, I guess Fusion Cell came upon me, Jeremy Montgomery, one of my cellmates. He reached out and said, hey, I see you're a transitioning veteran. I know I transitioned and I had tons of questions. If you ever have questions, just reach out. And I had a ton of questions. So I reached out to Jeremy and said, hey, when can we chat? And we did. Yeah, we linked up and we chatted for about an hour. And we didn't talk about a position, but he said once we were done talking, we realized that there might be a position for me at Fusion Cell. I said, sure, let's take a look at it. 5 interviews later, I started doing my passion, which is helping vets find meaningful employment. So I love what I do.
Brian, where'd you grow up? Where's home originally?
Home originally is Houston, Texas. I love Houston, but I'm a football fan, and people say, are you a Texans fan? I'm actually a Dallas Cowboys fan. Houston's my home.
Now, you know, Brian, you were talking about a lot of things there, but about your service, and we're going to get to some of the unique aspect of Fusion Cell as it pertains to on-base access, for example, with the military. But talk real quickly, what drove you to want to serve? What drove you to want to serve in the Air Force? What was the driving force there? Was it family? Was it an event? Was it what led you to actually want to do it?
That's interesting. You know, it's a funny story, kind of. You know, and I say it because my mother was a drill sergeant in the Air Force.
We know how that household ran, right? Bed was made at 6 a.m. Dinner, you know, things were clean.
Absolutely, yeah. I grew up really disliking the military because of that. And I say that because Mom ran a very tight ship, and I said, I never want to do that. But it was always in the back of my mind, you know, and I'll never forget. It was my senior year, and that senior year they're giving out scholarships, and they're talking about what people are doing next and all these things at the awards presentations. And my name wasn't called up for anything. And I said, man, I need to get out there and do something because obviously college wasn't a thing that I was going to be doing, so I had to figure out how to serve. And I'd already talked to my mom about it. Before you know it, I went down to the local recruiting office and said, hey, sign me up. I'm ready to get moving. So it was one of those things. I didn't want to do it, but I realized that the life that I had already lived with my mom, that it was a good life and that there could be something out there for me, you know, even though I wasn't ready to go to college at that point.
Interesting.
It worked out.
Well, I can relate. My late dad passed when I was young, was a Marine DI, so I kind of had that in my blood. Brian, talk about the unique connection with the Department of Defense that Fusion Cell offers.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things, you know, I think you look at our team that we have, we're about 90% and higher for folks that were senior in the military or just retired from the military. And having that connection, we have a been there, done that kind of thought process where not only have we served, but we've also made that transition, and we understand some of the things that could have been improved upon, right? Some of the things that Fusion Cell is bringing to bear. right? So what we're able to do is, because we were in the military and still have those connections, we can help bridge the gap a little bit differently than some other companies. We're still able to have our tentacles out there to share things that are happening today, and also be able to still speak that same language to people on a day-to-day basis as they look to transition. So it really works out really well doing that.
Elaborate more on the value of on-base access, knowledge, and contacts.
Absolutely. To get on base, it's an exclusive club. You have to have an ID of some sort, one that they've cleared to allow you to go on base. And all of us, I think all of us, 90% of our team that serve, can get on base. We still have access to the commissary, BX. We still have access to the education office. One thing specifically, there's a program that we have there, the Transition Assistance Program, the TAPS program. And we're trying to gain inroads there where as we get on base and we know that there's this program out there what's going to allow us to help folks transition, or they're trying to help folks transition, we can get on base and have those conversations and break those barriers that other companies can't do, be able to have access to that talent.
And it's such a great synergistic win-win, or actually win-win-win, triple win for the veteran or the military member, that civilian company that doesn't have access to the veteran, and the veteran or folks that may not, have access to the talent pool coming from the bases. It's interesting too, Brian, in my advocacy work for veterans in New England and the National Navy SEAL Museum, or Navy SEALs out of Fort Pierce, Florida. The military is it's a big world, right? It's a big organizations, big world. But what I find is, if you can earn the trust and respect and knowledge of the military, and they begin to know of you, and they begin to trust you back, you can get this access and trust, and they realize the value of helping members transition. And I'm starting to hear Fusion Cell is getting that trust at the highest level in the DoD or within the bases. And you folks as recruiters like yourself, you and I know, but a lot of our listeners may not know on this podcast, the recruiters in all these branches are the best of the best. So I think you put it together, and that's maybe one reason why Fusion Cell's working.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, you hit on something as it relates to base access. We actually recently had a trip to Offutt Air Force Base. So Offutt Air Force Base, what they did is they said, hey, we're looking for something to coincide with the DoD level transition assistance program. So they wanted something, a TAPS-like transition program. So they said, well, let's bring in a lot of organizations that can help us bridge that gap to the civilian sector. So Fusion Cell was invited. We were there for a couple of days, and I'll tell you, the outpour of folks interested in, hey, well, what can we do with your Vet Academy you all talked about? You all talked about ambassadorship. You all talked about resume writing. You talked about all sorts of different things that can help a person transition 2 years out, a year out, 30 days out. And I'll tell you, the excitement just from that one event that's created as we continue to go to other bases has been amazing. So, yeah, we're doing great things for sure.
All right. Tell us about the Chiefs group.
So as a former chief, they always say once a chief, always a chief. So if any enlisted rank, you go from E1, so you're there as an enlisted person, so enlisted grade 1 all the way to enlisted grade 9, so beginning to end from a seniority standpoint. So E9 in the Air Force is a Chief Master Sergeant, also referred to as a Chief or Chief Master Sergeant. So I was fortunate enough with a lot of help and a lot of teammates on my side to reach that rank of Chief Master Sergeant. So being part of that fraternity or that group of folks, being a chief, I'm still able to be a part of that. So when I go to a local Air Force installation, I can go directly to the chiefs group and kind of get the pulse of the base. Because the chiefs, they help lead all of the personnel on the base. So if there's something happening at the medical facilities, they know what's happening there. If there's something happening at the service facilities, you name it. Anything on base, chiefs can kind of help you determine as to which direction they should go or shouldn't go. So I still have my hands in that and all throughout the bases in my area.
Now, one of the things I've heard about being around the Fusion Cell team and from the CellMates is the TAPS program. Can you elaborate and put some illumination on that?
Absolutely, yes. So the TAPS program was brought about to be able to help military folks transition. There was a thought process. Once you retire or once you separate, they just basically hand you your discharge paperwork and you leave. Well, that thought then turned into action to where how can we help people really transition into the sector. Well, what the military did, and I say military DoD wide, is they decided to have a 3 to 4 day class that details resume writing, it details how to network, it details preparing yourself for your medical side of the house. It helps you to prepare as much as possible. But I'll tell you, it's really not enough. I'm not saying that it's not good, but it's not enough. There are certain things that I think the TAPS program could do a better job of. And we at Fusion Cell have been able to add a couple things. You know, we've added negotiating strategies. We've added, from a standpoint of when you retire, you got to start thinking about how you're going to wear your hair. You got to start thinking about how you're going to look at this thing mentally. You know, the mental aspect of a thing versus just the transitional aspect of a thing. So a lot of those things happen in the TAPS program, but we're helping bridge that gap along with what the military is doing too. So I don't know if that helps or answers that question.
No, it does. It does. Great job, Brian. Again, Brian Lewis, our cellmate, featured in our Fusion Cell monthly podcast. Talk about a trip coming up.
So tons of stuff coming up. The offer trip is really translating into other different trips. There's an organization that we're working with. It's a lean initiative, so Lean Six Sigma. They're talking about having us come out to Guam. So Guam Air Force Base, there's an Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. They're looking for possibly bringing Fusion Cell out to talk to their folks in relation to transitioning, to help introduce the aspect of what Fusion Cell can bring, to help introduce the aspect of, hey, here's some things that we can do in order to help folks transition. And so they're looking to bring us out there. We haven't really got the date together yet, but it's something that we're going to be doing in order to help bring it to those folks out there as well.
Good stuff. Before we let you go, Brian Lewis, what about top three? And you got some great success stories. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in relation to the top three, again, as a chief, you have E9. Below that, you have E8. And below that, you have E7. That's going to be our top three, and that's in all branches. They're all called something different. So that's also another organization. There's several organizations that the people that are within Fusion Cell are part of, my CellMates are in, and we still have access and tentacles in there. But I'll tell you, one of the things, not only being a part of those organizations have been good for Fusion Cell, but we've had some success stories. Specifically, one that I'd like to share with you is a gentleman by the name of Michael O'Connor. Michael O'Connor retired in the Air Force as in 06. People that are familiar with the rank, 06 is the rank of colonel. The colonel in most services, or captain in the Navy, to make the correlation. So he retired trying to figure out what he wanted to do. So he reached out to us. And once he reached out to us, we were able to assign a career agent who happened to be myself to be able to help him navigate through those waters. And I'll tell you, it worked out really well for him. He was able to transition to a company called Maersk, one of the largest logistic companies out there. He was able to do it remotely, which worked well for his family, being able to sit and enjoy his family now that he's retired, as well as still be a viable person in the civilian sector. And he's had nothing but great things to say. So yeah, I always mention him because it's a great success story, and it's one of those things when you think about it. People say, what rank can you work to? We can work all the way from 010 to E1 to help people bridge that gap. So Michael O'Connor is my success story, and it always makes sense to bring up his name.
Again, you're listening to the Military Effect Fusion Cell podcast. I'm your host, Jack Heath, our featured cellmate and guest on this episode, Brian Lewis, and he's a senior career agent, Fusion Cell. Brian, before we let you go, great job. You did the Air Force, you did the recruiting, now you're at Fusion Cell. Do you feel you're fulfilling an important mission? Is it working? Are you connecting? Are you bridging that gap between military talent and the civilian workplace?
I would say absolutely we are bridging that gap, and it is working. You know, I think the beauty of what we do, or the beauty of when I look at Fusion Cell, is I think there's passion. A lot of us are coming off of careers that we've already had. Again, I did 27 years, 10 months. My partners have done 20 years. So we've had careers, and now we're looking at something to be able to have a passion to share and show. It's not about the financial rewards, although we are a for-profit company, but it's not about that. It's more so about how can I bridge that gap? And what we're doing, we've had, I can't even count the number of folks we've placed with positions that they didn't even feel that they could achieve, meaning a lot of us coming out of the military, we have a ceiling of where we think we could be and what we think we can grow with. And this ceiling needs to be broken through. And I think that's what Fusion Cell helps to do, is it helps to see what you actually can do, because now it's your choice. Now it's your choice of where you could go and what you can do. And I think we do a great job of being able to help not only the companies see that this is the talent or these are the skill sets that can help build your company and bring value instantly, but we also help the candidates see that, man, I am valuable. I can bring this stuff to bear, and I look forward to doing that. So it's working very well, and we're doing it with passion and heart. So I love every minute of it.
Brian Lewis, thank you for your ongoing service. Great cellmate, great team leader. Thank you very much, Brian. Until next time with the Military Effect Podcast, I'm Jack Heath. Make it a great one, and thank those and support those who serve. We'll see you next time.